Today in the shop at Woodworking with Wes, we're going to build some doors. Recently I purchased a stile and rail set from Amazon for two different kinds of doors. This is a square cut shaker stile and rail like this, just a typical square cut stile and rail. This is a beveled stile and rail set, and you can see the little bevel that it puts to the inside of the door. These are both made for basically a shaker style door, but we have just this little bevel here and we have a square cut here. We're going to build a square cut stile and rail. We're going to set it up. I have my my 1 3/4 Porter cable router. In order to build doors, and I've built a whole set of doors already, I had to build a new router table. I had built one before. I did a video about a $5 router table. It wasn't heavy duty enough for a full set of doors, so I put $10 more with it and built another one. So this is just a shop built bench top router table, and we're going to set it up and we're going to make the stiles and rails with our new router bit set and make a door. When I do my stiles and rails for my doors, I always start with the end cut for the rails. This is a stile, this is a rail. I always do my end cuts on my rails first. So this is the bit that we'll be using. And we'll set it up here. Now this is set up to cut the same size top and bottom, but we'll have a little more reveal on the top than we will on the bottom. And I'll show you how we set this up. The bearing in the middle is to run the wood against. But anyway, we'll get this all set up. I'll show you exactly how we do it. But we start with the end cuts to the rails first. I've made my router table so that it just fits down on my bench. And the first thing you do is clamp it down good and solid. And I build it in such a way that I have these little feet here that make it just perfect to clamp down good and solid to your bench. And that just makes a nice solid router table. Doesn't jump around, doesn't do anything because it's all connected to my bench. Okay, good and solid. All right. The next thing we need to do is to adjust the height of our bit to cut where we want to, and we do that by just adjusting the height of the router. Now we want to have about 1/8 of an inch, and so we're just going to start there by just kind of giving it a preliminary look. We're going to test this a couple of times. We're going to set our router bit right there. Now I didn't have it plugged in while I was playing with it. Always make sure that your router is unplugged when you put your bits in and get it set for the deal. For the height and everything. You don't want to have your fingers next to a router that's plugged in on your bits like this. The other thing I'm going to do now is I need to have a surface to run my rail stock against. And I always, whenever I do my doors, this is my practice piece. This is my stile and rail pieces right here. This is my stiles, this is my rails, and I always cut it too wide. So this is left and rights and left and top and bottom and pieces. The reason I do is I get the ability to hang on to my piece of wood better. It's just safer. And when I cut my rail stock on the end, I get a better cut because I have a longer surface to ride against a fence. Now, I needed to make a good fence too. So this is the fence that I came up with. Now, let me show you how it works. have my videographer come around to this side over here. This fence fits on top here, moves forward so that my board has a nice solid surface to run against, and only the blades are exposed that need to be where it's cutting. We'll get this set up and clamp our fence down to our router table. And then we'll run our rail stock. That's first. So let's get our fence set up. I made my fence out of melamine and banded the front edge so that I had a nice smooth edge. My router table I built out of pre-finished 5/8 Baltic birch, so it's nice and smooth, and my work will slide across nice and easy as I'm pushing it through. This is how we'll push our stock through right here. Now we want our fence to line up with the bearing that's in the middle there. So how do we do that? Well, piece of thin material that will fit in the middle there and put it where the bearing. Now this little stick here is running against, or should be running against the bearing. Yeah, there's the bearing right there. So what we want to do is move our fence forward. Now see how my stick touches all the way along the fence and against the bearing? Now the fence is even with the bearing all the way through. And the bit will only cut as deep as we allow it, but we want it to line up with that bearing. So we just take our little stick in here again, make sure we're right with the bearing, and we're right where we want to be. Okay, we're going to put a couple of more clamps on our fence. Get it clamped down good and solid so it doesn't go anywhere. The last thing we want this fence to do is to move while we're pushing work through. We want it to be so solid and so strong that we can push hard against the fence as we're running our wood. So we clamp it down good and tight. Now we build our fence in a way that allows our router bit to rotate smooth without touching anything, and we put a notch in the back here that allow for the exhaust of the wood chips to get out of the way, and we'll run our wood along this side. This is about as safe as we possibly could use this router bit because we've got most of it covered by a fence. We've got a nice fence to push our wood along. We can keep our hands back because we have our wood double thick. We've tried to make it as safe as we possibly can, and that's always a factor whenever we're doing anything, especially with a router bit this size. Be safe. Always be safe. These need to stay the same size, always. We're getting ready to run our test piece through. One of the other safety precautions we're going to use is ear protection. So we'll put our safety glasses on, put our ear protection on, and get ready. Now that we've made our little cut, we'll check our measurements. We want our top piece, our top reveal, this is the face side. We want our top reveal to be 3/8. We want our back cut to be 1/8, and our tongue is 1/4 of an inch. Now we want this to be a little heavy on both sides because we're going to be flat sanding this down. This is a 7/8 thick piece of wood, and I always make my doors by starting off with 7/8, but we want to end up with 13/16 after we flat sand. So we're 7/8 right now, and we're just a little over our 3/8 and a little bit over our 1/8, and that's perfect. So we actually have it set the exact right height right now. Now as I ran my piece through, I noticed that I'm just running on the bearing a little heavier than I wanted to, but I think we're going to leave it right there as we run all the way through. So let's go ahead and run all the way through, and then we might adjust our fence just a little bit forward. But we'll see. We'll start there first by running another piece, or by running this piece all the way through. That's what our cut looks like all the way through. But as we put this in here, see how you get a little bit of a wobble there? That's because I'm running on the bearing all the way across the middle here, and I want that bearing to be exactly level with my fence. I have always found that I get a better cut when that bearing is perfectly level, and so we're going to adjust that with a hammer. And we're just going to give this fence just a little tap. There, right there. That's perfect. Let's tighten up our clamps all the way across. That's perfect. That's perfect. It's running on the bearing. So this surface right here is riding on the bearing, but the bearing is perfectly lined up with our fence. So as we push our piece of wood through, or stock through, it rides on the bearing to make sure that our cut is as deep as it's supposed to be, but we have good contact with our fence all the way along to make sure we get a perfect cut and our piece of wood is stable. Now that's our test piece. So this is our rail piece right here. This is going to be the top and the bottom of our door. So this piece will be this piece and this piece. Let's go ahead and run our rail stock right now. You can see how by having a wide piece, I was able to control my wood and keep my hands back away from the blade. It's always just been a way to make sure that I was a little safer as I was running my stuff. Now, the next thing we need to do is put our groove in our pieces, in our stiles and our rails, so we need to change our blade out. Again, unplug our router, and let's change out our blade. Now, all we have to do is reach underneath here. Oh, we've got to unclamp our router table from our bench because I have it so close that I can't get my router out. This is our grooving bit. It just has a single blade and cuts our groove that our panel will go into, and the ends of our rail stock will go into. You always want to make sure your router bits are in good and tight. I always do this with both hands because I can pull hard together, and my router bits are in there solid when I do it that way. I always do it with both hands pulled together. And your router goes back in the collar. The collar is permanently mounted, so you only have to take the motor out, but your collar is always mounted. And then we'll snap it down there solid. We'll remount our table, our router table to our bench, and then we'll adjust for height based upon our tongue on our rails. We're getting ready to set our grooving bit, and we line our grooving bit up. This is our sample piece that we made. We want our grooving bit to line right up with our tongue because that keeps our door level. So let's start there. This is our sample piece. We'll plug our router back in and give it a test. See how we did. You want to have your groove cut to be perfectly lined up with our tongue. Now you can see we have a little extra here, so our tongue, our groove is just a little too high. We want to set it down just a little bit. So we'll just ever so slightly bring it down, not even very much at all. And we'll test it again. I think we're perfect. Right there. See how that made a nice clean cut right there? That's exactly where we want to be, just like that. Now we can test that. This is our stile, or our rail stock right here. And move that in. See, we're flush top and bottom. Actually, we've got that just exactly where we want to be. So let's go ahead and run our groove, this side, and this side of our rail stock. So that's what we'll do now. You can see how the channel on the back of my fence moves my sawdust waste out of my way. Now, there's one thing I've found in using this stile and rail set. On a shaper, you have a bigger head. These are just router bits, so they're smaller, but on a shaper you would have a bigger head, more revolutions, faster speed, and a cleaner cut. This works great, but you have to deal with a few things. One of the things that we have to deal with is, see these little minute chips? Top and bottom. That's what happens with a rail set, a stile and rail set from a router. I figured out a way to compensate for that so that we can eliminate that and have a cleaner cut. We're going to do it. We've got some chips on this one too. Not bad on the rail stock. But we're going to go over, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to our jointer. We're going to set our jointer at a 1/16 of an inch, even less than that. And we're going to joint off this edge on our stile and rail stock. When we run it back through, it won't cut any of this or the channel. It'll only cut the bottom of the channel out again, and so we end up with a nice clean stile and rail piece. So let's go over to our joiner and run it through the joiner. Again, you can see how making my stile and rail stock double wide allows me better control of my wood as it goes through the machines. Now we'll take this back over to the router table and we'll recut our groove, and it'll only just cut out the bottom, and we'll have a nice, clean, crisp stile and rail set. If you don't have a jointer and you're just doing this on a table saw, you could set your table saw to take off. But by setting your table saw, you could take off just a 32nd or a 1/16 of an inch on your table saw, and then just take a sanding block after you get done, and just take your sanding block and sand this edge and get a nice edge. So you don't have to have a jointer, but a jointer works really nice if you have one. Just set it very, very slight so it just cleans up that little chippy edge. and then you end up with a nice clean edge. Now we have our stiles and rails all run through the shaper, through the router table. What we'll do now is go back over to the table saw and cut our stiles and rails to width. I always make these a little extra wide so that I can join them and do whatever I need to. We wanted 3-inch stile and rail, and we have 6 1/4 total width. So we can cut our 3 and our 3 and our 3 and our 3, and we have our stile and rail set done. Okay, let's dry fit this and just see how we did. See if it looks like a door. We did good. Now we got to make a panel. Okay, we've got our stiles and rails all machined with our router bit set. We've taken our router bit set out of our router because I've got set up for the next step, which is the panel. And I've already milled a panel to size and to thickness, except for the fact that the panel is too thick to go in the groove. Now, okay, this is the face side of the door here, and the panel's going to sit right here, but you can see the panel is too thick to go in the groove. And what we have to do is we have to cut this panel down and back cut it. Let me show you a sample. This is a back cut. It's got a little rounded edge on it here, and that little rounded edge fits in the groove like that, and that's the back side of the door. So it has a nice finished look on the back side and a panel on the front. And that's what we're going to do now. We're going to go over to the saw. I'm going to show you how I first notch down on the saw. Then we're going to come back and we're going to put that little round indentation on it on the router table. Let's go to the saw. The first thing we're going to do, we've got our blade set to the height that we want it to be. We're going to take a couple of cuts and we're just going to work our way to the thickness of the groove, which is 1/4 of an inch, but we don't want to take it off all at once. We want to take it off a little bit so that we get this to fit good and tight. So let's just watch me go through as I cut my panel to the size I want. First thing we do is take off a little. I always start with my ends first, then do my side pieces. Just makes a cleaner cut. Now we'll just keep taking that off until we get down to the right size. Now, you can see we've cut this to fit inside of our slot. It's a good snug fit, and we want it to be snug. We still have a little bit of sanding to do, and we don't want it to be loose in there. But you can see this rough, raw edge that the saw leaves. We're going to go over now to the router and put that little cove cut that will smooth up that raw edge. I've set my router up with a cove bit, and I've taken the bearing off so that I can run my piece of wood over the top of it. And as I run this through, that'll give me a nice round edge on my panel. Let's do that and see how it turns out. That makes a nice look to the back side of your door. Now we're going to sand this edge a little bit. We're going to sand the face of our panel like we always do before we assemble, and then we're going to assemble our door. You always sand the front side of your panel before you assemble because you just can't sand your panel properly in the corners after you assemble. So let's go ahead and get ready to assemble. These are our rails. Here's our stiles. I always lay my stiles out like this. I do a little trick to tell me how much glue to put on. I don't want my glue to go, if you put let's turn around here so you can show you. If you put your door together, you don't want glue out here on the face of your stile and rail because that's too hard to get rid of. So I always go like this, and I just mark the depth of my tongue on the inside here, and I run my glue here, and then I never have problems with my glue getting out. Now we have one additional step to make. This is a solid wood door. This is alder. Our panel is alder. Solid wood expands and contracts with temperature and humidity. So we need to allow for expansion and contraction. Now if this was a paint grade door, this would be an MDF panel. An MDF panel doesn't expand and contract, and so we cut the panel the full size that would fit in our stile and rail set. When we do an all wood door, we cut our panel 1/4 of an inch less than the size that it accepts, and we use what we call space balls. These little balls are specially manufactured to fit inside the grooves, and you put 2 along the sides like that, and 2 in the ends like that. And these little balls are soft rubber, and they will squeeze and allow the panel to expand and contract and hold it centered so that as your door expands and contracts, the door stays correct, allows for the expansion and contraction, but it doesn't cause any problems because these space balls allow for that, and you never, ever, ever glue your panel in. The reason you don't glue your panel in is because if you glue your panel in, as it expands and contracts, it will split this panel because the glue doesn't allow it to move. The space balls do. So let's go ahead and glue our door together and clamp it up. Gotta put my glasses back on. Always a problem, can't see without glasses. So, and I just take my glue bottle. I'm very generous with my glue so that I have a good glue joint. I get my face all covered. I put some in the grooves. Now you can take a little brush if you're so desire and put a little spread your glue around so that it's a little more uniform. I don't, but that's because I just go faster when I don't. Okay, so we're gonna put our door in here. You see we got good squeeze out. Always want good squeeze out. Face of the panel goes to the large side of the stile and rail set. So here's our panel, like that. Here's our other rail. Squeeze out. And the other stile. Now you see it doesn't line up like it's supposed to. Well, part of the reason is these space balls aren't compressed yet. First thing I like to do is get it all even on one end, shove it in there, and get one clamp on it. One of the other things I like to do is just personal choice. I like to elevate my door a little bit, get it up off my table when I clamp up. Just makes it a little easier to get the clamp on it. Okay, let's get that going. We're going to move these stiles and rails so that we want it good and flush along this side. I clamp up like that. I'm doing good there, good there. My hammer always needs a little encouragement sometimes to line up. There we are. That's just the way we want it. Okay, now we move down to the other end. We start putting our clamp on this. Now we've got some real encouragement to take place here. Now we just give it a little tightening and there we are. Just like that. That door is glued up. Now let's check it for square. See how we're doing here. Lift our clamp up there so we can get our little square in there. Oh yeah, we're just perfect. Just absolutely perfect. Okay, that builds our door right there. Now, what we'll do is we'll wait for this glue to dry. We'll take a glue scraper and scrape off our glue. We'll take it, we'll flat sand it, and then we'll sand the door ready for paint shop. Now, I made a video that's already up about the amount of sanding and the process of sanding that I do through a door to make it paint shop ready. So we won't do that today on this door. But we've built our door, we've got it clamped up. Now it's ready to go through the sanding process and off to the paint shop. Learn how to build doors. It's important. And these bits that I bought from Amazon, I'm really liking these. They work really well. I've already built one set of doors, and I got another set of doors to start next week. So they work great. It's always fun to have you in the shop, show you how I do things as a cabinet maker, full-time woodworker, building shaker doors for clients, cabinets that I have to do. This has been a fun project and a fun lesson to learn and easy to do. If you have the right equipment, just a homemade router table, router bits, you can make this door also. And we'll do another project next time on Woodworking with Wes.